Namaste.
Namaste.
And welcome to our continuing series, Savitri is the Message. As always, with our beloved Alok.
Namaste.
We are continuing with this theme in Savitri of the message. And I will read
Page 6.
page 6. And Savitri too awoke among these tribes that hastened to join the brilliant summoner's chant, and, lured by the beauty of the apparent ways, acclaimed their portion of ephemeral joy. Akin to the eternity whence she came, no part she took in this small happiness. A mighty stranger in the human field, the embodied guest within made no response. The call that wakes the leap of human mind, its checkered eager motion of pursuit, its fluttering hued illusion of desire, visited her heart like a sweet alien note. Time's message of brief light was not for her.
So beautiful and full of deepest, profoundest, not just meaning, but inspiration, showing us the way. So the way is we make a choice either for the fluttering hued illusion of desire, interspersed occasionally with little light here and there, which shines momentarily, lights that shine in the night, which we call light. Or else we seek that light which never dies, never fades, which night cannot cover. So this is the way that Savitri has shown. So one of the things that Sri Aurobindo reminds us, particularly in Essays on the Gita, that the divine, when he takes a human body, one of the things he does is shows us by example the path to be followed, God's own example. So here in Savitri we see all the three. The word, three ways of education as Sri Aurobindo brings in. The word, and the word with the utmost power packed in it. The influence that emanates from the very atmosphere of Savitri. Mother's made that observation, just to be in its atmosphere. And the third is by example, because it's the story of the Divine Mother and the story of Satyavan and the story of Ashwapati, all the three combined together. Satyavan is the Lord become human and he shows us the way. Savitri is the Divine Mother become human. And Ashwapati, of course, is the divine representative in man who is showing us the way. So here, those who want to follow really this path which leads us upward towards great ascension have to at some point make a decisive choice. And that choice is that this is okay, life has been so far like this, but now time's message of brief light was not for us. And this is what we see, one of the biggest challenges that we face in, if I may say so, understanding Sri Aurobindo and the resistance to Sri Aurobindo, which is also there. We want a reiteration of our old stock values. So when Sri Aurobindo speaks and he says that, look here, there is something very beautiful that is being prepared for you, that is there for you, the new world, the new consciousness. Man extends his hands and heart and the body and mind and says, yes, we want it. But when he says, hold on, there is a condition. Leave behind the old to receive the new. All the hands and hearts come back like a tortoise inside the shell. This very canto shows us on the very next page why Savitri has come. She has come to give her being, her light, everything to men, to acclimatize us to that light. to
You
that
know that
atmosphere.
acclimatizes a line that was never in the old editions of Savitri.
Oh,
They found it only for this 93 edition.
but this is a very crucial line.
Absolutely.
Often when people say that, they want to come to Pondicherry for good, I tell them come and acclimatize first. So they wonder, sometimes one feels acclimatization means the weather is hot. I say, no, weather is tolerable. Weather you can make friends with. But the pressure, the Yajnavedi, it's a burning Yajnavedi. It looks like it's covered with one of the ordinary marbles, frankly speaking. And very unassuming space, if you really look at it that way, the ashram. But it is like as if 1,000-tongue flames of sacrifice rising to the highest. So it's a Yajnavedi. The moment you come, you touch, you start feeling that pressure of transformation. And as always, there is a resistance within the human being. The resistance to the message is because while we want what Savitri has come to give, what the Divine Mother has come to give, we do not want to fulfill the conditions. We want, we use the word, something very interesting. He must give us everything unconditionally. God must give us everything unconditionally. Well, He does, unconditionally. Even somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, what if somebody doesn't do any labor? What's going to, He said, of course, if he continues with his faith, he will arrive. But it will be much, much longer with lot of wastage of time. But when I read that, what an assurance.
Yes.
He says, still he will arrive because the divine does give unconditionally. But if we fulfill the conditions, then it's a joyous, delightful journey, faster, smoother, safer.
When this lady who was not so gentle passed away,
Yes, Mridu, we can see.
Mridu. Mother saw Sri Aurobindo's symbol on her head, and she said, her too? And Sri Aurobindo said, all of them who are mine.
Regardless of their state of consciousness. This is mentioned and I was so surprised.
Yes, me too.
Regardless of their state of consciousness. And the mother says, what a power, magnificent power. So it is true that the divine gives himself unconditionally. The conditions are not that, without conditions I won't do anything. The conditions are so that we can arrive not only faster, swifter, but smoothly. It's like a joyous flight rather than a bumpy ride. Still, he is the pilot. He will make us go,
And yet the past around our future's ankles clings.
Yes. So this is what we read, she has come to give all this to man. And for that, what a preparation, what a tapasya. Often I say, people just read Sri Aurobindo and the mother's life. Look at the tapasya they've engaged in. Just to look at their life is so, not just humbling is a big word in front of the divine. But it is so inspiring that, look, this is the kind of life which should be led. When I read about the way he, comes out of Cambridge, just leaves his ICS thing just like that. And then the Maharaja's service, just like that, because, there is a call of the freedom movement. And then he leaves that movement where everybody is regarding him, hailing him as somebody so great, indispensable. He leaves it just like that for the sake of a still greater. And then even his personal realization, he renounces. Just like that, to hasten the collective realization. It's so inspiring.
And so similar to Mother.
Absolutely.
She had to leave so many things.
In fact, in certain ways, I must say, Sri Aurobindo has used the word 10 and the mother 10 times more. So,
yes.
And she will not make a fuss about it. It's not, see, I have renounced. There is, people renounce and there is so much great talk about renunciation because it's clothed in a certain dress which earns your name and fame. Look at the mother's renunciation. In 1920, she comes. 14 also she had to go back because of the conditions. And even then she says, had he said one word,
I would have stayed.
I would have stayed.
Yes.
What a love. No questions asked. Had he just said one word, stay, I would have stayed.
Yeah.
And then in 1920 when she comes, so I often, just wonder. The Divine Mother lived in France, in Paris, good climate, all the, brands are available in the branded store. She would move
Japan.
around with lacquered shoes, and this is how she lived her life. And when she comes here in 1920, in this summer heat and everything, in fact, Nalnida recounts an incident which she fell ill. It's there in the prayers, but she doesn't recount. Nalnida recounts. When she went to Karaikal, you'll read a prayer where she is suddenly becomes very indisposed. And she speaks about, how she invokes the grace. She lived in a dark, dingy, damp room which was infested with white ants and rats. And then she comes. And she comes and lives here. Faces all the struggles that one can imagine. Falls almost sick to the verge of death because she would take all the troubles upon herself. And from 1920 to 1973, she doesn't go. I mean, just look at the physical things.
In Japan,
It's unimaginable.
she spends so much time. She loved Japan. She
Yes.
said it is the country of beauty. It represents physical beauty in the world. And yet she tried so hard to inculcate something in these people.
Yeah.
And
She says there is a sense of beauty, but the spiritual side is missing. And
Exactly.
she says that you find only in India. What a what a way she has understood and everything. And it's not easy, See, it's one thing to live in the ashram with things provided. Because thanks to her, often we have to remember it that whatever we are receiving here, every bit is because of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Otherwise, there is nothing our own. Sometimes people don't realize it, that because of their name, everything that we are getting is because of that. And for herself, she had to look after, she says, 900 people at one point of time. She says, I don't have anything. And then she knows that something will be arranged. And not only she has to look after people, she wants to realize the dreams of the eternal in time. There is Auroville, there are projects, all these things are there. How she would have, lived day to day.
And in those days, they had no money.
Yes, they had no money.
There was no money. There was a postman who used to give her 1 rupee every month, faithfully. He made very, very little. And one day, that 1 rupee didn't come, and Mother sent out her secretaries to find
Yes.
that man to see if he was all right. 1 rupee.
That kind of love, consciousness, it's unimaginable. Selling her own saris. This is a very touching story how Navjatji bought them and gave it
Yes.
back to her. So somebody would say, why he bought them? Man rakhna hai Bhagwan ka. You have to keep the word of the Lord. She has asked that they should be sold. So he says, all right, I'll buy it and give it back. So time's message of brief light was not for her. It's not just like that you rise to those heights. Often people think it's just sitting in meditation. No, it's a whole life. Their life is a life of constant sacrifice to the highest. This is how I see their life. And that's the reason why we are here. People often they think it's the institution and all that. So at least I know about myself and I share. Who cares about, just an outward thing? It is about, this is the place where they did their tapasya. Their touch, their stamp is there, their breath is here. That's what draws us, nothing else.
Yes.
But look at man, this also we must read simultaneously so that we remember when resistances rise. Hard is it to persuade earth nature's change. Mortality bears ill the eternal's touch. Why? Because the eternal simply says, shed off your mortality. Now mortality means all the limits to which I hold on to. My. It says, leave it. There is something much greater. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. that purity, that call to the heights, that will for sacrifice. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness. It trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice. And these last four lines, so what happens to the message? This what? Message is there, but what man does with the message? That is also important to remember. So while she has given us the message of transformation of man into the divine, man is quick to change the divine into the human. The God who has embodied love and grace becomes a God of justice who will punish us. That is the change we bring. And there Sri Aurobindo writes, it sullies with its mire heaven's messengers. Its thorns of fallen nature are the defense. It turns against the severe hands of grace. It meets the sons of God with death and pain. So when the message is given, we say, oh, this is so wonderful, but are you sure? Do you have the mandate to give this message? This is not rational. How is it possible? That's how we respond and react. And finally, a glory of lightnings traversing the earth scene, their sun thoughts feeding, darkened by ignorant minds. That's how things turn into a religion. Darkened by ignorant mind, the dogmas. Thus alone can it be, not otherwise. And Sri Aurobindo reminds us, thus they have shut their tireless grace. In a chapel, they prayed to the universal. With this touch of humor. In a chapel, they prayed to the universal. The golden book was wrapped in silken strings on a sanctified formula and bound God with rules and norms, and thus they shut off His tireless grace. So this is how we do. Their work betrayed, their good to evil turned, the cross their payment, for the crown they gave, only they leave behind a splendid name. This is what Sri Aurobindo has cautioned several times with regard to Christianity. He openly mentioned that, it was built upon the tomb of the sacrifice of Christ. Christ didn't come to bring Christianity. He came to liberate, to teach us the way to freedom. Same thing with all the great founders. Krishna didn't come to say, build temples in my name and dance like this. He said, Mad bhavam mad gata, be full of me. Chaitanya became like that. But it's not like Garba dance. It's something else, tremendous. What they gave, become so full of the Lord, intoxicated with the Lord. And of course, I need not mention what has been done to the message of Muhammad and others. So only they leave behind a splendid name. That's the problem. He comes with the message, and what happens to the message? And that is why this time Sri Aurobindo wanted it to be foolproof. There is a, you know that over mind creation, and Sri Aurobindo said, we'll form a great religion.
Oh, Mother came to him,
Yeah.
and Mother said to him, I have the power of the Word. Imagine that, the power of the Word. And he said to Mother, you'll become a great, great leader, revered in all the world. But we don't want that.
The whole world will prostrate.
Yes, and Mother gave it up immediately. Immediately.
That is a renunciation, one of the examples of renunciation. And when somebody asks the Mother that, is it a new religion? She said, there will be people who will try to make it so. But they are foolish, they don't realize that there is no way you can turn Sri Aurobindo into a new religion. It's an impossibility, because if you look at Sri Aurobindo's writings, it's so many-sided. That's why the big problem is anybody can take out anything and say this is applicable to me. And that is why Mother cautioned with regard to message, finally since we are at this, that to read Sri Aurobindo, and I would add the Mother, she says, don't just read from here and there a line, a portion. In the world of WhatsApp, very important. So she says, read all that he has said on a subject. then you will understand what the real message is, what is the drift of the whole thing. And then when you look at their life, how they dealt with different sadhaks, that's why it's so important to read their life. And I have so many stories when people say, Arey, but it's written there. I said, yes, that was the problem. Writing is cling to truth. But we don't know what is truth. So people started telling, Mother, why are you tolerating this man? Mother, why are you taking this man? And she said, what can I do? I only wrote them cling to truth, but they all understand it to mean their truth. So everybody has their own truth.
And Mother says, study Sri Aurobindo by subjects.
Yes, that's
very, very important.
All that he has written. And I would say, if one doesn't understand the mother, she has brought the same thing in a very simple way.
Yes.
Then one gets the total picture. Otherwise, the message itself gets very easily distorted in the human mind by changing it into a rigid dogma, one-sided formulas, which very often only confirm something within us. And in that passage, cling to truth, she gives examples. She says, for instance, and she says, each of us may have our sibboleths, our points where weak spots. So she says, we justify it. She says, somebody is a vegetarian and he thinks all the non-vegetarian people are in falsehood. Then she gives another example. Somebody is a friend and one says, oh, that person is in falsehood. But it is not like that. It is a journey, how beautifully they have opened the doors to fix things in a fixed way, formatted way.
What was it? The Vegetarian Society asked her for a message, and Mother wrote, eat meat.
Before that, she kept silent. For 2 months, she kept quiet. Now then, they said, Mother, they are asking. She said, I had something very strong to write, that's why I didn't write. So she said, what were you having in mind to write? She said, I was going to write, stop making fuss and start eating meat. then she said, their mind will be blown off. Blasphemy. So she changed it and said, instead of, turning it all, very nice message into dogma. But again, if you read this passage, you may get an impression that the mother is saying, eat meat. That's not so. When she was asked that what happens when you eat meat, then she explains the story of the chicken when it goes into the egg, body, and how when you eat those things and how it created a disturbance. So then you wonder, Mother, what do you really mean? So what she means is grow into wideness and be supple, keep to the one important thing needful, the divine. Other things will fall in their place if you keep moving toward that. They will drop off when it is necessary. But if you turn them into a dogma or make, nowadays the latest fad is organics. Vegans. No,
vegan, yes.
Vegan. So I am a vegan. Now it's become a new in thing. Okay, be a vegan. There is nothing wrong with it. But don't become a crusader and intolerant fellow that, if you are not a vegan, you are doing a sin, crime against humanity, like the Jain sadhus who will, That's... To pick up one principle and place it out of place and to turn it into an absolute is the door of falsehood.
Yes.
That's how Sri Aurobindo explains in Essays on the Gita that what happened to Gandhi. You pick up non-violence is all right. You want to practice it any which way. It's a wonderful thing for a particular person who feels drawn to it. But you turn non-violence into a national policy. You are in for disaster. And even more so if you forcibly apply it. See, for India, Tibet, 62 war, partition, all this because we tried to turn it into a national policy.
Yes.
It is not true. It's not consistent with truth or with human nature. Where is the Gita? All this we forget. So to pick up any principle, the principle here is pick up anything out of context, turn it into an absolute law and rule. You are doing a violence against truth and turning truth into falsehood.
Now, the opposite of vegan is the new paleo.
Yes.
That means eat like when you were an animal.
Yeah, that's natural, spontaneity. Be yourself. So, is like... So that's what every aspect, divine truth can be distorted. And that's why the insistence in yoga is don't turn it into a philosophical system Take the journey, pick up the pilgrim staff, and walk the way. And then you will see the revelation comes, the understanding grows. We'll come to that other page.
Yes, which is
56.
a consciousness that knows not its own truth.
Wonderful. Yes.
And then it goes
Yes,
55
page
and then
onwards.
56.
Yeah.
A consciousness that knows not its own truth, a vagrant hunter of misleading dawns, between the being's dark and luminous ends, moves here in a half-light that seems the whole.
Just what we were reading, sharing, yeah.
An interregnum, in reality, cuts off the integral thought, the total power. It circles or stands in a vague interspace, doubtful of its beginning and its close, or runs upon a road that has no end. Far from the original dusk, the final flame, in some huge void in conscience it lives, like a thought persisting in a wide emptiness. As if an unintelligible phrase suggested a million renderings to the mind, it lends a purport to a random world, a conjecture leaning upon doubtful proofs, a message misunderstood, a thought confused, missing its aim is all that it can speak, or a fragment of the universal word.
It's exactly what we were discussing just before this. Here he is speaking of, because our consciousness is so limited, therefore we look at an aspect of whatever we look at. We use the word reality. That's our understanding or misunderstanding of reality. But it's an aspect, a fragment. And mostly it is the surface. And we take it to be ultimate, we take it to be final. We draw, just recently there was a very interesting mail that why God created, He's a monster, torturer, cruel, who has created this world, gives suffering to everybody and pain. So I said, excuse me, He has come several times teaching us how to come out of this suffering and pain. It's because we insist on our own way. He sacrificed Himself in matter. Second is, it's not like, this Semitic conception that God is up there, He has built the world and from there He sends some
looks
suffering.
down upon us.
Looks down upon us. Quite condescendingly. In fact, He becomes the humblest of the humble.
Yes.
The blade of grass, the atom of matter, the clod, the stone, everything is He. He becomes it. And therefore He absorbs ultimately all the shocks, a billion shocks that come. So this idea that He has built a world and inflicts suffering. And then when we look behind the appearances of suffering, we see that it was the only grace in somebody's life because it helped open a door to someone who would remain asleep all his life. As Mother says, very beautiful, it's there in the Bible, it's much more easier to make a camel pass through the eye of the needle. What is the analogy? I just love this analogy.
Yes.
It shows the proportion.
Yes.
It is easier to make a camel pass through the eye through a needle than to make a rich man turn to God. So he doesn't turn when everything is good. So then he says, okay, sorry, I have no choice but to prick that needle inside you. So one wakes up to pain. Then again he says, you are a torturer. He is waking us to light. So, but we look at appearances and we draw conclusions. As he says, lending a purport, it lends a purport to a random world because it looks like random, series of accidents. The thing that is missing is the fire which should try to really understand and look deep. If that fire is there, the world will disclose the unseen beloved behind everything. But that fire is missing, and one of the things that Savitri does is, it awakens us to that wonder and beauty. Oh, is it so? Night is not our beginning nor our end. We came to her from a supernal light. By light we live, and to the light we go. Immediately you are fired that this is not, this suffering, evil is a passage. It is not the beginning nor the end of the road. So that message, how it tends to be misunderstood. And whose message? You remember that prayer of the mother Shakyamuni in Tokyo, in Japan. I forget the place. Was it Kyoto or Tokyo?
Kyoto, I think.
Yes, I'm not too sure. 1915. So she says that, 17. Buddha comes to her. Sakyamuni. She signed off as Sakyamuni. And she has realized all this and she is holding it back in her. So he comes and says, I have come to you because just as you loved me once, I love you. Now, when was it that she loved Buddha once? One could be previous life, but she was an adept in Buddhist yoga before she came to Pondicherry. Sri Aurobindo's words. So, at some point of time, she was moved by that Buddha's idea of compassion and realized the truth of Buddha, which she explains so beautifully in many of her writings. Even Dhammapada, classes on Dhammapada was a tribute in a way, and that was a preparation for humanity. So he comes and says, I see that you are hiding, that I see the diamond clothed in purple, and you're hiding this light from showing to others, revealing to others, because you are afraid it will be misunderstood. Then he says something very remarkable. He says, but when has man ever understood the divine? When has man ever understood the divine? Rama comes, look at his message. Christ we spoke about, Krishna he comes. When has man ever understood the divine? And the gap can only be filled by yoga. That is what is the beauty of, Sanatan Dharma, that I say, that it is not satisfied with belief and philosophy. It is yoga. Take the journey of yoga, start with a metaphysical, we need a conception. But you can realize that, and that's the only way to perfectly understand.
Yes. One day, Huta asked Mother, as she was quite difficult at times, and she says, are you really the divine? And Mother said, come back tomorrow. Huta told me this personally. She comes back, and she said, Narad, from here up. And she couldn't speak. She could not speak. Mother had given her a glimpse. We have to see that we are in the divine, not just the divine in us.
Yes. That's an important truth to remember. And it's an important meditation. I have always heard, meditate the divine in your heart. This meditation, the world over, is known. But meditate you being inside the divine, and the world being inside the divine is a very, very powerful meditation.
Yes.
It's difficult to practice, but once one gets the hang of it, it liberates endlessly. It's like it is the step towards all is the divine. Otherwise, you discover inside you, by extension in everybody. God is in everyone. We have heard from the sages and saints. But at the end, it still creates a division. God is within, the world is outside. Shut off into some illusory dream. So we draw from that. But the moment you say that world is in God, it's a movement within God, then you say there is hope.
Yes.
And then comes the next step, that all is divine, divine in the making, divine in the unmanifest, divine in the manifestation. Then comes the third step. Then all is wonderful. So, Utta's story, she told me also another one, very interesting, that shows the ways of the divine and how we understand or misunderstand. How we misunderstand ourselves and how the divine understands us. Because we are at, man misunderstanding, looks at a little fragment. So, once he says that she was in one of those awful moods, and Mother gave her some flowers, white rose.
Oh, I remember that.
You
Yes,
remember?
yes.
She threw it off
Threw them on the floor.
and said, I don't love you,
Yeah.
and walked away in a huff. I am packing my bags and going.
Yeah.
Imagine, Divine Mother, before whom sages and saints will come and bow down. great beings would come and
Yes.
crave for a moment's company. She is indulging beyond measure. And then somebody does this. So, as she was packing the bags, Vasudha Bhen, she went running. He said, Mother has given this card for you. Card says the mother loves her so much, and he says, okay. Doesn't really believe, mother loves me, what is this? I have heard all this. Then she says, mother said something the moment you left. I is silent. Would you not like to hear? Okay, you tell me what she said after I left.
Yes.
She said, mother said, she does not know how much she loves me. She does not know how much she loves me. This is the divine way, Savior's way of love. Where can one find even a little of this love? And if one has to embody it, one has to unite with the divine. There's no other way you can embody this love where you go straight behind appearances and somebody is throwing things at you and you say you have love in your heart.
Yes.
It needs tremendous, not just courage but vision to see that.
You have shared some special experiences before that we have all been grateful for. I will share one now of mine. It was about 7 or 8 years ago, and the Lord spoke to me and said only 4 words. Love all, no exceptions.
Wonderful. And, people, since we are at it, ultimate message is love, Savitri is, to feel love and oneness is to live. This love is not just ethereal. It works in the most outward material field. There is a line in the Gita, Yoga Shema Vahamya, which is you serve now by life insurance. Those who are steadfast in yoga, I take care of them, even of their most outward needs, because they are, engaged in yoga. So she created an ashram as such. If you look at it most practically, people ask about joining the ashram. Well, it takes one of the things, many aspects. Is she said that, people would always come and tell her that, they don't have, they are so busy with the small things of life, with their needs, that they have no time to really go within or seek the divine. So she used to think that, one day I will create such a world. And then she says, at least by the time what is regarded normally as the middle of life, I did have the means to create a space like that where everything was provided for them, all that is necessary. And I would say I have seen so many ashrams, much more than what is necessary. And she said, okay, now you seek the divine. And then she says, just like the Times message of brief light, and what man does with the message, misunderstood. She says, but my experience has been that it doesn't work, because when there is liberty, it is mistaken for licentiousness. Because everything is provided, man falls into inertia. And that's what happens. He says, it means humanity needs some more blows. She doesn't want it. She says, I don't like the method of blows, Kali's method. People would often ask her. She said, no, I don't like it. It causes a lot of destruction. I don't like that method. And till the end, she would not use that method. And yet, she says, humanity is not ready.
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo, so many of her, whenever she would meet Sri Aurobindo in the subtle physical after 1950, 59 to be more specific, every time Sri Aurobindo would say, world is not ready.
Not ready.
World is not ready. World is not ready. It still does not want the divine. It still does not want the divine. And what did the mothers say? What is meant needed for readiness? There is a whole passage, 1957, is a talk after the supramental manifestation. She speaks about the spiritual evolution. And she says that time presses. I would add, Sri Aurobindo said that spiritual evolution is the hope of man. And she says, and I would add, time presses. Because, as we move further, things will become more and more pressing upon us to change. And then at the end she says, all that I need from you is a sincere yes in your heart. If it is there, all the rest can be done. She has made it so simple. Sincere yes. Yes, mother, I want it. Sincere. Not like, okay, I want it. Nice. Like somebody, Amal Kiran said, no, came to ashram, walked into the samadhi and said, where are the t-shirts sold? So buy the... Sometimes you have very funny incidents, no?
Yes.
Other day, few days back, I was entering. I often, chuckle at many of these things. So there was a couple quite lost, asking the person at the gate as I was about to enter. Said in Hindi, I'll repeat in English. So Hindi, that flavor is there. यहाँ क्या है? समाधि है, खाली समाधि है और कुछ नहीं है. What is there? So the person at the gate said, there is samadhi. Only samadhi, nothing else. Arey, this samadhi.
And now it's, where is the gold dome?
This samadhi, it will change your life for good. Life for good. Only samadhi. So because they associate samadhi, though great saint samadhi is there, you go do pranam, maybe put a chadar and come out. Only samadhi is there, nothing else. So they were still hesitating. I didn't wait to see what they will choose, to enter or not to enter. But it was a very funny moment. Many such things are so funny that people, don't realize the value of what that the mother has done. Partly our fault, those who are supposed to be the, in some way pallbearers, because the mother has given some kind of task, is that we have painted him into a philosopher and a thinker of that kind with no grounding, as if, heart is not important. High philosophy, discuss the levels of supermind and overmind. People are lost. They don't understand.
Can you tell the story about Vashishta Ganapati Muni standing outside the ashram gate?
Yeah.
Can you remember?
You would probably...
Well, I only remember a little bit of it, but he was...
I remember his darshan with the mother. But
He was in rags, and they didn't let him in. And he just stood there. He stood there, wouldn't move. They said, you can't go in, you can't go in. Mother says to one of her secretaries, who is that man who is calling my name constantly? And it was him, and she had him come up.
And for people who, many may be knowing, but some may not know, he is the person who first recognized in Sri Raman Maharishi that he is a Siddha yogi. Yes. Otherwise, Raman Maharishi would just sit and be meditating for hours. So he is the one who actually installed him as the great master. So, Vasishtha Ganapati Muni. Then he had a meditation with the mother. And the mother was very happy.
Yes.
She said, he is one yogi who could follow me right up to the Brahman consciousness.
Yes. And she asked him to stay.
Yes.
And he said, Mother, I'm a wanderer.
And then Vasishtha Ganapati Muni was asked, what was your impression?
Yeah.
He said, Divya Murtulu, Divya Murtulu. Divine beings who have taken a human body. He could realize that he's divine who has taken a human body.
Yes.
And that's why many things, about this place. Something very interesting that, again, since we are speaking of Raman Maharshi's ashram, a lot of exchanges, but not going into that. Once in front of me, somebody asked one of those yogis who are now there, yogis or practitioners of yoga. And someone asked him that, in Pondicherry ashram there is so much freedom, no dress code, nothing, boys, girls, they mix, move around. Isn't it somewhat like putting ghee and fire together? But everywhere else we see some restriction or the other. So he gave an answer which even we don't understand sometimes. Yes, they are divine beings. They have absolute power, so therefore they can do this. What a power. Therefore they know. Wherever you go, however far, they know how to. All that is needed is we must not forget the goal, not forget them. And even otherwise, they do bring back so many stories like of Krishna bringing back. So that is the power they embodied, the love they embodied. And even the knowledge they embodied is not a mental knowledge which we tend to put into a philosophical bracket and compare it with this ism and that ism. The knowledge that Sri Aurobindo brings is a integral knowledge. It doesn't cut the world and God. Leave aside all the textbooks, since he speaks about interregnum of reality, consciousness that knows not its own truth. So there was once a discussion going on that, is it like Visishta Advaita? Somebody asked this question. So Visishta Advaita is the relation of soul with the divine. So that is the only soul with that ultimate reality. So you have these three branches, Dvaita, Advaita and Visishta Advaita. And many other sub-points. But Sri Aurobindo speaks about not just soul with the divine, but nature. Who has touched this nature? Even Tantra, which touched nature, is ultimately to find the door of escape.
Yes.
So this is what we read just now. Beautifully cuts off an interregnum in reality. We see just a narrow bandwidth.
Little break.
Small little. And what happens? Cuts off the integral thought, the total power, that power which is everywhere, Dash Mahavidyas of the Upanishads, everywhere in every corner of existence. Even in the darkest abyss it is there. We don't see it. The absolute power can afford to do that. And Sri Aurobindo says that, the sign that God is supreme power is that He can afford to become the weakest of the weak. Because His ultimate power. He knows, doesn't matter, put me any state, I will eventually come out of that. A few more lines, maybe then we can stop. It circles or stands in a vague interspace, doubtful of its beginning and its close. This is our mind, a consciousness that knows not its own truth, is moving here. Or runs upon a road that has no end, far from the original dusk, the final flame. In some huge void in conscience it lives. The original dusk when the divine consciousness is descending towards creation, and at one point it takes a leap into the inconscience. That is the original dusk when it is merging into night. And the original flame, the home from where it has come, towards which it will eventually travel, because it's always connected with that. The final flame, in some huge void in conscience it lives, like a thought persisting in a wide emptiness, mechanical round of things, like when we wake up in the morning with a mechanical thought.
And who could even speak about this?
Yes.
Except Sri
one who
Aurobindo.
has linked the two.
In Book 2, he never allowed Amal to ask one question on any line.
Yes.
Nobody had been there before.
Yes.
Only he.
As if an unintelligible phrase suggested a million renderings to the mind, it lends a purport to a random world. Random in its appearance. Things that seem disconnected outside, but they are all connected through a chain which we cannot see. That interconnectedness of the world we miss. A conjecture leaning upon doubtful proofs. God is proof. Well, all the proofs can be debated. God is not. All the proofs can be debated. Every evidence against God can be debated. And every evidence in favor of God, mind can debate it. So, it's a game people play. So often, at least when you are going through that phase of mental evolution, I used to have fun like that. You pick up a thesis. See, it can be proved. Totally you can prove same facts.
Yes.
You can prove it this way, you can prove it that way. That is the capacity of the mind. So a message misunderstood. The message is, creation is the message. Man is the message. What is man? Man's structure itself shows he is meant to become a bridge. The fact that he suddenly stands up erect is itself a message. His life is a message. The dream within him is the message. We don't need to read a book to know what is our purpose. We have a dream of perfection in life. We cannot sleep with rest until the dream is somewhere realized. Our life is a message. And since we don't understand, the divine comes to show us what that message is. A message misunderstood, a thought confused, missing its aim is all that it can speak. At the end of the day, after leading a full life, you say, I don't know, maybe at the end it is a photo frame. With, or a fragment of the universal word.
Yes.
Page
96. All came at once into his single view. Nothing escaped his vast intuitive sight. Nothing drew near he could not feel as kin. He was one spirit with that immensity. Images in a supernal consciousness, embodying the unborn who never dies, the structured visions of the cosmic self, alive with the touch of being's eternity, looked at him like form-bound spiritual thoughts, figuring the movements of the ineffable. Aspects of being donned world outline, forms that open moving doors on things divine, became familiar to his hourly sight. The symbols of the Spirit's reality, the living bodies of the bodiless, grew near to him, his daily associates.
So we'll read this again and
and go to messages
go to
again.
messages.
Yes.